Welcome to MoVeConversations presents. Today we have an interview with Dr. Sita Naik, former member, Board of Governors, Medical Council of India. Dr. Naik retired as professor and head of Department of Immunology and as Dean of Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences in Lucknow. As I said, she was a former member of the Board of Governors, Medical Council of India. In fact, for about 22 years, from 1987 till her retirement in 2009, she worked at SGPGI at Lucknow. And she was involved in conceptualizing, planning, and setting up the Department of Immunology. She supervised and ran this laboratory till her retirement. And it continues to be among the best centers for the diagnosis of immune-mediated diseases in the country. Like we say in India, that the greatness of the guru is not only based on his or her achievements, but also the achievements of her students. So many of her graduates are heading departments in leading institutions like PGIMER in Chandigarh, CMC Vellore, JIPMER in Puducherry, and many are working in different parts of the world in various well-known hospitals. Welcome, Dr. Naik. Thank you very much. It's our honor and privilege to have you with us today. Thanks for taking time out to talk to us and explaining to us about the development of COVID-19 vaccines.
Thank you, Venkat. Thank you for inviting me to be on this little chat. There is a great deal about it in the public domain. And a person who for most of her life has tried. When I entered immunology, it was a term that nobody knew about. And my parents asked me, what the hell are you going to do? And for most of my life, the country didn't have any departments which provided training. And the term was unknown to the layman. They said, you're a doctor, what's your specialization? And I said, I'm a clinical immunologist. What is that? What do you do? From that, COVID, if at all, if it has done nothing else, has certainly made immunology a very well-known term, and all aspects of it, everybody is discussing, irrespective of how much they know about it.
So yeah, so not only immunology, you also worked on viruses, right? Hepatitis B and D viruses in North India?
Yeah, I worked most of my latter part of my life, I worked on various aspects of hepatitis viruses, especially B and E. B has a vaccine, E doesn't. So, viruses are, each one of them is unique. I'll start by just a few sentences on immunology and vaccines.
Right, that'll be good.
Yeah, so the immune system, in fact, is the most unique system in the body. Unlike other systems, there are no specific organs which define it. They are just a set of cells which are present in every nook and corner of the body. And they are basically the defense mechanism. They have this very unique characteristic of being able to recognize self from anything that's not self. So it's like the army having a little forward post along the border. Enemy does anything, two bullets come, they also fire back 2 bullets and everybody goes back to their positions. And that is what it does. Any little insult, and we get them every day. The peripheral parts of the immune system don't wait for any major central activity. They take care of these local infections on their own. And we stay healthy. We don't get infections unless the peripheral frontline part of the immune system is overcome. Then when this message reaches the central part, then there is a movement of the whole army, whole battalions are sent off to the periphery, and then all the guns come out blazing, and Then if you can't still cope with it, then you call for more reinforcements. And the immune system is designed to multiply the cells and send them out to meet each of these foreign agents that come. But in addition to this, the very unique aspect, which is, I think, one of the most exquisite experiments of nature, is the ability of the cells of the immune system to recognize these foreign antigens, foreigners. It is so unique that the influenza virus of 2019, 2020, whatever immunity you develop, will not work against influenza, which will infect you in 2021, because the virus has been clever enough to change a little bit. So its recognition specificity is exquisite. And that is the word for it, exquisite. It doesn't exist in any other system in biology.
Right.
So the way the immune system recognizes is what gives the immune system that strength. And once it recognizes this foreign antigen, it retains memory for it even after the disease passes for long periods of time. And we know, for instance, if you get smallpox once, you never get it again if you survive, because that memory is retained for all of your life. On the other hand, if you get chickenpox when you are young, maybe for 40 years, 50 years, you don't get it again. But when your immune system starts declining with age, many of you would have had experience that your grandfather had chickenpox when you had it. So, you know, the memory does wane. And there are others for which we don't know what is the memory, and we are not able to retain that memory. So the body has, the recognition system has its limitations, but most of the time it retains a fairly good memory, which is what we exploit in vaccines. So instead of getting the infection and then generating this memory, we give an artificially generated product which will generate that memory.
So that's a vaccine.
Yeah, so the body will retain that memory, and if you get the actual infection, then this memory will be recalled, and the whole system will then get activated and produce the cells and the antibodies which are required for eliminating that infection. And because the memory is so exquisite for each virus, you have to have a very specific vaccine for each infection. Right?
Right. So what are the various kinds of vaccines then?
Well, the simplest ones are like, we started with smallpox as the most successful and the oldest one. Heat inactivated or formalin inactivated. You just kill the organisms. You can grow it in large numbers in the lab, and then you mix it with, you know, something which we call an adjuvant, which is just to boost that immune response, and you give it.
So you inactivate the virus and then give it.
Yeah. So it hasn't done us any harm. We've had I had a smallpox vaccine. Nowadays we don't give it, but we have a number of heat inactivated vaccines. Even the polio virus is in fact not even heat inactivated. It's a live virus. But we have a virus which is not infective. It doesn't cause the disease, but is antigenically and structurally similar to the one that causes the disease. So the memory to that polio also prevents the pathological polio virus. Then we have some where it's a toxoid, like the protein that is produced by that bacterium, like tetanus toxoid, right? So there are different types of vaccines, and traditionally these were the vaccines.
Right. And how do they work against the virus, basically? How do they do that?
So you immunize, and the body produces an immune response, which is identical to the one it would have if it had actually got the infection. And then it will produce those memory cells, which will be retained by the body, so that when the actual infection takes place, it will look at it and say, oh, here it is, and go out and fight the infection because the memory has been retained.
So it would sort of stimulate a lower degree of the illness. Is that how it would,
No, no,
not necessarily.
Actually, they don't generate any illness at all. Most of the viruses that we have, the vaccine itself may cause a little local, itching, burning, mild fever because you have an adjuvant, which is a foreign protein, which are just mild reactions, inflammatory reactions. But the virus, the vaccine itself very rarely causes. If it did, you wouldn't put it in the market. Because you're going to give it to millions and millions of people, right? So you wouldn't put it in the market. So part of the development is to find something which doesn't cause an illness.
Yeah, that gives a, it's a nice segue to talk about what are the steps involved in developing a vaccine.
So initially, of course, you have to find, when it was the older vaccines, when they were just heat inactivated or formalin inactivated, it had the whole organism there.
Right.
But basically now, of course, science is advanced. We know, molecular biology is advanced, so we know the structure of these organisms. And since we do not want to have side effects, we are trying to find more specific vaccines, which will be only that part of the virus which induces this protective immunity.
Okay.
So you have to isolate the virus, you have to learn to culture it, do the molecular biology, learn or identify the part of the virus which actually produces immunity. In this case, what we are trying to find out is the knob proteins of the COVID virus.
Right.
And then, make that into a vaccine. So once you have identified that product, then in vitro in the lab, you have to make sure that it neutralizes the virus, doesn't allow it to multiply in cell cultures, whatever. And then you give it, if you have an animal model, then you give it to the animals, you give them the virus, which is what the Oxford group has done with monkeys. They have shown effectiveness of their vaccine in monkeys, the COVID vaccine. So once you know that, in a sense, it is working and doing its job, then of neutralizing the virus, then you have to go through the various steps of human trials. So the first step is what we call phase 1, where we just give it to a few volunteers to understand exactly the question that you asked. Does it cause any disease, or does it cause any reaction, or is it, can we tolerate this injection?
Right.
So it's a little difficult because they're healthy people, and so you have to really be ethically very, very clear and get consent, and because you're injecting normal people with this thing, and you don't know what the reaction is going to be.
Right.
Once that is clear, then you do a phase 2, which is to give it to 2 groups of people. The phase 1 and phase 2 for vaccines are often done together to accelerate the process. In a disease, you do phase 1, phase 2 with a control group which doesn't get the drug, and the disease group gets a drug, and you have parameters.
Right.
But in vaccine, you can't do that because the disease you can't inject people with the disease. You have to wait to get infected, right? So it's a little difficult. Phase 2 is a little bit more complicated. But once you have done the phase 1 and phase 2, you have to do the phase 3, and that is efficacy.
So how long does it take between phase 1, 2, and 3?
Well, in the traditional sense, we were talking in terms of 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, it's 3 to 5 years. So the phase 3 actually has to be in very large numbers of people. Those studies are done in tens and thousands of people.
Yeah, that's what I thought, like 10,000, 50,000 or whatever numbers like that, right?
Because it partly depends upon the frequency of the infection. So like when I was involved partly in a leprosy trial, now already leprosy was a very low incidence disease. So your vaccinated group versus the unvaccinated, you wanted to show that it actually prevents leprosy. There should be enough episodes of leprosy. So we needed to do 10,000 people to have enough people with leprosy because the disease itself is not so common. Whereas here, of course, we have, I guess, in high infection places, COVID is sufficiently adequate. For instance, let's talk in Wuhan.
Hmm.
The vaccine that China has come up with, they don't have, it's a heat inactivated vaccine like the Indian vaccine. They don't have enough infected people. So they are going to do it in Brazil. I think they've just started their trial this week in Brazil, because Brazil is having a lot of cases.
Right.
So you need to have enough cases to show that it is working. So altogether it takes, it normally takes 3 to 5 years with all the regulatory controls and everything else. So when people talk about 3 months and 6 months, it does, people are a little skeptical. At least the scientific community, I think, is a little skeptical whether it will be that easy.
Right. So given the, the various stages of development, what are the, possible problems faced during the development? Could there be unexpected side effects? What are the issues related to safety? Some of them you mentioned in passing, but like a reaction, local reaction on the surface or of the body and so on. But there would be.
Well, the first one is, I think people are now talking about other approaches to the vaccine, like a DNA and an RNA vaccine.
Right.
The DNA vaccine is actually taking a bit the important part of the gene of the virus and putting it into a totally different virus.
Right.
Which is non-pathogenic virus, which is what the Oxford vaccine is. So that the other virus is only a carrier of the important part of the COVID. So it's a carrier. But we have, and the American one, the Boston vaccine, is an RNA vaccine, which is a little bit of the RNA itself. Now, these are vaccines which have not been approved by anybody so far for any disease.
Right.
So the approval process itself, under normal circumstances, I would have guessed that FDA would take just a year or two for the paperwork and getting the approvals.
Right.
So when people talk about this accelerated thing, one has concerns about safety.
Right.
Because
right.
We're going to go out and give it to millions.
Especially if there is like the whole category has never been approved, right?
Exactly. So we are going to give it to millions of people. There have been a few historical incidents where the vaccine has been deployed. And, they've had to withdraw it because there have been some adverse events. So I think, and we don't know if one dose will be effective. We need to give 2 doses. These are things we can't do in monkeys or in experimental models. You'll have to do it in humans.
Yeah, so, talking of mRNA vaccines, they have not been effective even against the influenza virus. I know, like recently there has been news that they gave it to 45. I think it came out yesterday, right, in Journal of New England Medicine, that they gave it to 45 people and the mRNA vaccine is working and so on and so forth. But for so long, even influenza, it's not been like new strains keep coming up, and you referred to that. So would they be effective, mRNA, especially mRNA vaccines?
We don't know. So this is all part of that learning curve. It's all new, and the disease is new, its immunology is new, it's understanding. Every day we are learning new things. And so I think a lot of it is, learning on the job, literally. Yeah.
Right. And you're saying that, like, there have been cases while they have tried it during the testing period. Not too long ago, maybe about a decade ago, GSK in Europe had a very interesting name, Pandemrix, and for influenza pandemic. And there was a chronic sleep disorder which was created by this vaccine, and then they had to pull it back, right? So if you do these things within 12 to 18 months and so on, so we understand the urgency. All of us want it, right?
Oh,
but
I think the safety is very important. So I don't know. I hope that the political pressures that we are seeing around the world don't coerce, compromise on the quality, because that will be really, really unfortunate.
Right. And they have to test it against various age groups also, right? There was one vaccine which was pretty effective for everybody, except that when it was tried in infants.
Yeah, the infants have a less mature immune system, which is why
Yeah,
some vaccines are given at 3 months and some are given at 3 years. So those things are there. I mean, it's the trial has to be very, very comprehensive. Yeah.
right. So moving on, there's also now, I mean, in India, a lot of news about the plasma therapy. So
Okay.
question
So
is some of those who recovered from this have got it again, so they didn't have built enough immunity themselves. So how much immunity can they pass it on to some people? So how effective is this treatment that people are talking about? And there was this news item in India that people are going and collecting plasma and then treating, going to the doctor and getting treated.
I think in the US there has been some smaller trials.
Okay.
Most of these have come to the conclusion that those who go into the ICU and have very severe disease, the severity of the disease is less, which is
Mm-hmm.
understandable because you're giving them preformed antibodies. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to wait. The immune system takes anything from 7 to 14 days to make your own antibodies, right? So that lag phase is taken care of. So you already have antibodies that somebody else has made. So it
Right.
will neutralize the virus. So it will decrease the viral load. And therefore it has some benefits in the clinical outcome or the clinical course of disease. It's not that, I mean, it's not something you can give it to normal people or it's just. But on the other hand, experience of over the last 3 months of cases in the ICU, management itself is undergoing drastic change. People are understanding the disease a lot more. Not as many people are needing ventilators as they did because in the early days it was just panic. Everybody was going into the ventilator. Now people are monitoring oxygen levels much better. They are given just external oxygen support. It's only the oxygen that needs to be supported. In fact, when you put them on ventilators, some people don't do so well.
Mm-hmm.
So management itself is changing. I think, I don't know whether again, this plasma bank and cutting red tape is just all part of this, the optics of management that leadership has to provide for the constant news cycle, because, there is fear in the community and they have this responsibility of, looking as though they are in control of the situation. So I don't think it's a big kind of a panacea.
Mm-hmm.
Do a bit. Yeah, it might help a few people, but it's very
Right.
limited in its.
So another kind of treatment was, talked about in Singapore. Um, this is monoclonal antibody treatment. Singapore's Duke NUS Medical School reportedly worked on this, and they were to begin safety trials, I think, last month, and then on COVID-19 patients later. So how does this one work? Or how different it is from the
So
ones that
instead of
we talked
taking
about?
the antibody from a person who's been infected, you
Mm-hmm.
construct the antibody in vitro, right? So
Okay.
it's like the antibodies that we take for breast cancer, which are directed against the structures on the cancer cell. Similarly, these are antibodies which, out of all the in a person who gets infected, there are thousands of types of antibodies. So
Right.
you select the most efficient one for binding, the tightest binders by technology, and then you reproduce that antibody in huge vats and produce liters of that antibody. So it's a replacement of a sort for the plasma therapy, except
Right.
that you don't have to wait for a person to be infected. And so then you can inject them. We are using it in so many cancers. We are using it in rheumatoid arthritis. All kinds of monoclonal antibodies are being used. It hasn't been used so much in infectious diseases, but this is an opportunity to try it out. It
Right.
works, it's good, but again, it's only to decrease the viral load, and you can't give it prophylactically, right?
Yeah, yeah. So in fact, there was also news that they had tested out the South American animal llama, and they found some antibodies from its body. So will this fall into that category that they would take it out and?
Yeah, they're same category, except that, the thing is that some animals have easier types of antibodies to reproduce, their structure is different.
Hmm.
It's all technology. I mean, it's just what is technically feasible. And I think I have to move. I didn't charge my laptop, it seems.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah,
not a
just,
problem.
yeah.
Yep, not a problem. So yeah, so we get that. So that's the monoclonal antibodies treatment, and it is not a substitute for vaccines, because that could be
No,
given to people in advance, and then we could.
it's not to prevent, it's only to treat people who get infected.
Right. So
In
yeah,
the
then.
absence of a drug, in the absence of a drug, it would be a very useful part of the treatment, right? Because we don't
Mhm.
yet have an antiviral which is really effective.
Right. So now, that brings us back to the topic of vaccine development around the world. There's been news from India, from ICMR and Bharat Biotech, Covaxin, and that they would have something by middle of August, or probably like a 1 month from now. That was a news item, and we talked about just now about the various steps and challenges and so on. um, so where do you think are these prospects? And on the other hand, we have other people talking about that they are entering they've crossed phase 2, they're doing phase 3, and so on and so forth. Um, yeah, we'll all be happy if India, Singapore, America, who to see it like a Olympic race. But realistically, where are these people? Where do you think are the prospective ones?
Well, the Indian vaccine, you have already seen that there's been a lot of subsequent announcements and step backs and
Hmm.
cautions, and because obviously they did jump the gun a little bit with that
Hmm.
announcement. There is a vaccine. It is, I think, in phase 2. I don't think it has even gone. I mean, phase 3 is just going to start or is in the process of starting.
Hmm.
Even after infection, it takes 4, 5 days, 6 days for symptoms to come, and how many people they will recruit, and then so it's not. I mean, frequently scale. These companies, both Serum Institute in Pune and Bharat
Right.
Biotech, do claim that they have kept their production capacities all ready to go into manufacturing any minute. The moment there
Right.
is a licensed vaccine, they can, put out large volumes, which is good to hear. And I think even in the US, Bill Gates and a whole lot of these people have invested money in setting up facilities for production.
Right.
But as I said, all of them have, are all in that phase of two, 3. The US seems to be clear that whatever the $14 billion Donald Trump it's got a very strange name, that whole thing that is going to money which they have put into the vaccine thing.
Right.
They've been very clear that that will be for Americans.
Right.
The global Gavi, the Global Alliance against the Vaccine Innovations, that is a global innovation initiative. So all the Oxford and biotech, all these come under that. So
Right.
the vaccine will be available to everybody. But I don't think it's like tomorrow. It is going to take time. I mean, I
Right.
would say maybe next year, early next year, middle
Right.
next.
So it's not only phase 3, right? After that, we know by the end of it, or pretty close to that, we should know whether 1 dose is effective or 2 doses to be effective. Then there's about transportation, cold chain.
Absolutely, exactly. And if it's an RNA vaccine, what is the adjuvant you're going to use, and transportation,
Right.
and yeah, cost.
Exactly, right. We haven't even come to pricing, right?
Yeah,
Manufacturing to scale, at least now people have said that like they have kept their capacities ready, and Bill Gates and all are saying that we
so
will invest
no,
in half a dozen.
yeah, I
But
mean,
cost and price,
yeah, all the economies are tanking, and they've, so by next year, the money to buy it free or buy it from. So there are lots of questions. Besides, of course, the ethical ones, and besides other issues that in the Western world, we may be a little bit more compliant. In the US and Europe, in the US, there is a survey which says 30% of people will not take the vaccine, even if it is available. Because vaccine denial is a big problem in the Western world. So if 30% don't take it, it's like 30% not wearing masks, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's the opposite of herd immunity. This is the herd is passing on to everybody, right?
I don't know. So I mean, every day throws up very interesting issues.
So what would be your message for those anti-vaxxers now that everyone has seen the COVID effect? What would you tell them that why? What would be the couple of reasons why they should rethink their stand on anti?
That's a debate which is difficult to win. It is a debate which is difficult to win. You will be surprised at how educated and how well-informed people are vaccine deniers. So it's like them saying that if I wear a mask, I can't breathe God's oxygen. I mean, what do? You can't. Logic is not what you can meet them with. So, I mean, I don't think my message. I mean, people have been giving messages, which is very ironic because, in Pakistan, some 50 children get polio because the mothers or fathers refuse to vaccinate them. The whole world goes hoo-ha over it. But 30% of educated people don't take vaccine, then people seem to accept it. That's the way the world is. Yeah.
Yeah, that brings me to another point that you have spent your professional career studying immunology. You worked on where relating to vaccines and so on. So viruses. So what is one thing that you believed was true and later on found out that it was not? I mean, it can be related to immunology, virology, or I leave it to you. But what is the one thing that you believed was true and now or later on found out that it was not true?
I thought about this. I think science has been pretty robust. Not many, I mean, hardcore science has been disproved as such, really. I think that maybe some of the early enthusiasm that, we could conquer a lot of these diseases, and science has all the answers. I think generally we have to be more humble and accept that we are still a long way from that state. And, and COVID certainly has reinforced that.
Right.
And I think the world has to be prepared that this is not going to be the last of these things. So science, and it is unfortunate that where science is providing answers, has been consistently developing and trying to keep pace with the problems, health issues of the people, the anti-science community is getting stronger as well.
Right.
So, and that is something that is really disturbing to me. That is something that I thought science, there were all these enthusiastic groups in Kerala and Andhra and people moving in the periphery and thinking that, the poor, illiterate people, they believe in jadoo and the mistake. And we must educate them and teach them science. And I participated in some and wrote some pamphlets for some of them way back long ago. And earlier years, we thought that scientific temper would spread with education. Right. And actually that has not happened.
Right.
Because there's no correlation between ignorance and believing in I don't know what,
Right. Right,
Yeah.
right. But you know, it's very interesting the way you've talked about two aspects. One is the how natural systems have humbled us when we felt that, like, you know, like in engineering and technology, you know, when we can reach to the moon, to the Mars, and so on, where we have things under our control. Whereas in natural ecosystems, it's all uncertainty is the name of the game. And also you also connected it back to the thing that, like, human beings are also unpredictable. We think that, like, we educate, they'll be better off, and then we are finding the reverse effect, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So natural things, natural ecosystem as well as human beings are the more unpredictable and less controllable compared to
Absolutely,
engineering.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that we were earlier saying about how things will go back to just the way they were. Economically and otherwise, whatever happens, if we do not learn something about global warming and the environment out of this whole episode of 2020,
Right.
that will be really unfortunate.
Like, is there a way we can build our immunity from what are promoted as immunity boosters to protect ourselves from COVID-19? Is that possible? Yeah, Dr. Naik.
Yeah, so I think one issue that has um, it's always been there and got a new life is this whole issue of boosting one's immunity. I'm sorry, I mean, I'm a hardcore scientist, so I'm not very susceptible to these kinds of advertisements. But the thing is that the immune system is there, right? And whenever an external agent comes, it meets it and it deals with it. Now, the question is that whatever you do, you can't make it, I mean, it's 100%, you can't make it 120%. You don't need anything. If you're healthy, you're eating normal, and you're just an ordinary person, your immune system is good and ticking and working, right? Your heart works for you, your lungs work for you. If you abuse it, then of course, it has its side effects. And the same thing is for the immune system. Chronic smoking, too much of cholesterol, bad diet, all of these also affect the immune system. And therefore, the immune system may not be up to mark. But it's not that you eat a lot and don't do any exercise, but eat an immune booster and your immune system will be wonderful. I don't think it works that way. You have to keep your body healthy and then the immune system is there. And if you just take boosters, it cannot be excessive, because if you need X amount to fight a virus, you have that X amount. So having the double X is not going to, it doesn't become double X, right? It's what it is. So it's a trend. It has become a little bit of a fashion thing. It's like a lot of other things that, you don't eat this, you eat high fat diet, you fast for 16 hours. I don't know, everything seems to be a trend these days. But I think if everything is in moderation, you will be healthy and you don't really need to do anything special.
So if people can, but leading a healthy lifestyle with good nutrients is important. What you're saying is
Yes,
you
yes.
don't need to have supplements. A
Yes,
healthy diet.
yes, the immune system does, whenever it is low, then you have a problem. That is, if you're taking some types of drugs, if you're on, and many of the drugs do have effect on the immune system, and stress. There are enough studies to show that constant stress and psychological stress does have its effect on the immune system. So yes, so physical and mental health is important, but then that's important for everything. It's like for every other system.
Right. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Yeah. Grateful to you, Dr. Naik, for sharing your insights today on vaccines, how they are developed, and the new therapies for fighting COVID-19. My thanks to my friend and producer of the show, Mrigank Oja. I'm your host, Venkat. And listeners, viewers, please do not forget to subscribe to MoVeConversations on YouTube channel. We will be bringing to you more such interviews in the days and weeks to come. Thank you very much.